Maybe you can slow down now!
I can't! There's no brakes!
No brakes?
No way to commit, soldier.
Madagascar Kartz. I'm gonna be frank, I'm not sure how to intro this video. I've talked about both of the Madagascar movies that this game uses, so I guess I'll just talk about racing license-based games since I haven't exactly gone into that yet. From what I'm aware of, there's a fair amount of license-based games in the racing genre, regardless of which property they are, be it Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Shrek. It usually makes sense for them to exist. But honestly, Madagascar is a pretty bizarre pick to me. Sure, Madagascar is popular, but a racing game after 3 platformer games of actually decent quality? It sounds like it's just made to be a cash cow. You know, that is surprisingly the first time I've outright said that in a review series for license-based games, and I've done almost 50 of these. Well, I suppose it had to happen at some point. But today, I'll be looking at Madagascar Kartz to see if my little hunch is true. The characters are racing, and that's it. I mean, King Julian wants to hold a race, but not just a race.
But a special race to see who's the fastest!
There's just this one story scene, and nothing more. It's somewhat like the story of Shrek Smash and Crash Racing, where everyone is suddenly racing and that's pretty much it. But this game doesn't even have lore reasons as to why they're racing. But I almost kinda prefer this game not caring at all. Shrek brought up concepts and made it look interesting and then didn't do anything with it where they easily could have, but here the cast of Madagascar is just racing around and that's literally it. There's no actual reason, which I can actually admire in a way, which kinda sucks. At least they're honest about it. Could they have done something for the story? Probably not anything interesting if I'm being honest. So this is fine with heavy air quotes. It's just weird. I'm used to having more explanations with stories. But racing games tend to not have that good of stories anyways, so who cares? Again, this is just a really weird segment. So the first cutscene has this art style, which is kind of reminiscent of the Madagascar 2 game, but then you get in game and this comes after the second game and is on Xbox 360, by the way. Now, it's not bad per se, it's just that this game looks like it should be between the first and second game rather than coming after the second one. The character faces are what make it pretty obvious because they don't change expression ever. Now, because this is a racing game, it's not exactly the worst thing in the world because you'll be seeing the back of characters' heads most of the time, but when you do see their faces, it's not exactly pleasant. Alex looks like an animatronic, Marty constantly has an eyebrow raise, and Shrek looks stoned. Again, also Shrek and Bob from Monsters vs. Aliens are in this game. Bob was to promote the movie, and Shrek, because he's Shrek and already had a racing game, I guess. I will say that at the very least the details within maps are pretty spot on, and you can tell that the developers made sure to use actual parts of the areas you go to and stay relatively accurate in scale and positioning of where certain things are. Now at the beginning of races you see an overview of the track and it's too long. Most games that do this normally don't take that much time, but these are almost 30 seconds long! And yes, you are able to skip them, but come on! One detail I do appreciate though is whenever you hit an enemy or an enemy hits you, something shows up saying what and who hit you or you hit. This is pretty nice for whenever I place something down and about a minute later I just see someone get hit by the obstacle I put down. There's something satisfying about it. Anyways, the music is without a doubt the best part of the game. Each song is actually fairly lengthy, fit in a racing environment, and they give me vibes of the first Madagascar game's soundtrack, which is most definitely a plus. In terms of voice actors, most of them are different, including Shrek and Bob. This is a DreamWorks game. I'd be very surprised if any DreamWorks game had mostly the same voice actors. The only one that remains the same is Skipper, which is fine by me. The day I encounter a game where Skipper doesn't have his original voice actor, that game is automatically bad. Anyways, the characters don't just have generic dialogue when they get hit, which admittedly is still sometimes funny, like this Melman line.
If I see the light, I'm going right for it.
Characters also have specific dialogue whenever they pass each other.
You can lead from the rear, Your Highness.
Keep your head in, Melman!
have been overtaken by a savage cat.
You're the funniest looking horse I've ever seen. Widely traveled, are you?
Crafty little birds.
It gives a little bit of personality to the characters as well as show off their relationships with each other, with some being more passive aggressive than others and some straight up not knowing others too well. There's something to admire by letting their quirks shine out in a game like this. There are 5 game modes to choose from. In each one, you choose the speed that you want to race at, as well as the character you'll race as. Each character has different stats for their speed, drift, turbo, and also get a special item which I'll explain in a bit. The first 2 game modes are Quick Race and Championship. Quick Race is just a race on a single track, while Championship is essentially the Grand Prix of the game, having you race on 3 tracks back to back. Doing well in championships gives you a higher speed to race at and unlocks a character. Both of these modes have 6 racers complete 3 laps around the track before moving on to the next. Along the tracks, you are able to drive into item boxes, which can give out offensive items, traps to be laid down, supportive items for your cart, or can potentially give you your character's special item known as the character star power. This activates a unique ability that's different depending on the character, such as a move that slows everyone down, makes yourself faster while also being invisible, or attacks everyone in front of you. There is a mechanic called turbo in this game, and there are 2 ways of getting it. You either A, drift along the roads and cut corners, or B, jump off of ramps and perform stunts in the air. Using this turbo can boost you forward for as long as you hold it down, provided you have turbo remaining. Now the other 3 game modes I can elaborate on knowing the regular mode. Time trials have you try to complete a race with no other racers or items as fast as you can, while potentially beating the records that are set up. Move It has 4 racers instead of the usual 6. Whoever is in first place has a disco ball over their head. That person has to go through gates in order to score points. Hitting someone with an item will cause them to drop their disco ball, and might allow for someone else to snag it. They can also take it by simply passing whoever's in first place. The first person to get 50 points wins. Lastly, there's Checkpoint Race. This mode is similar to time trials with no items or other racers, but the difference here is that at the start, you only have 20 seconds to race. You have to last as long as possible by constantly collecting hourglasses that are laid out, giving you a little bit more time. Missing too many hourglasses will result in the end of the race. In every game mode, there are mangoes that you can collect on the tracks and from completing certain objectives. These mangoes are used for additional points in the championship mode, as well as unlocking stuff in the gallery. Your management of turbo is very important. Being an ability to go fast in a racing game, it's kind of a given that utilizing this would be vital, but it's still good to acknowledge it. There are plenty of opportunities to get and use turbo even for basic play. However, being able to change between drifting and using turbo can allow you to get creative with how you progress in a track. There aren't major shortcuts that aren't already laid out in the map, but you are able to drift often, and being able to jump freely allows you to use the terrain to perform stunts on small bumps for extra turbo. Having this additional turbo allows you to go off-road to make sharp turns and cut through certain areas to get ahead or to quickly get back on your feet whenever you're hit by items. You'll also have to be good at these, as not drifting correctly can lead you straight into walls, and failing to land stunts properly will not only not give you any turbo, but you'll also tumble for a little bit, giving time for other racers to pass you. Due to the turbo, the time trials are actually pretty fun to do, as you again will use your skills to beat these records, sometimes ridiculously so if you're good enough. Move It is a fun game mode as well. It still promotes you to be fast, but it also makes sure that you're efficient with your speed by having you go through gates as opposed to just being in first place for a set amount of time. Plus, with only 4 racers, it's not too hectic and your enemies have a chance of being able to come back in a way that feels fair and manageable. More on that in a bit. The one thing I don't like about this game mode is that if you fall too far behind, then you'll be boosted forward automatically, but if you're good enough, then you won't even run into this issue anyways. Also, some of the creativity with items is admittedly kinda cool. I have a feeling that that's one thing that all of these license-based racing games are gonna be good at doing. The character roster is absolutely pitiful. 9 characters is the most that could be scrounged up, and that's after including Shrek and Bob? You mean to tell me that in 2009, the amount of Madagascar characters that are in a Madagascar racing game doesn't even match the roster of Mario Kart 64 from 1996? And yes, I know that this was made before the 3rd movie, which adds some more characters, but so many characters aren't in the game that are some of the easiest picks. Nana, Moto, Zuba, Mukunga, even Mort and Maurice don't take part in racing at all. Plus, the Penguins of Madagascar show was airing during this time, so maybe a few characters from that. And you have the games. Like I said earlier, the plot pretty much doesn't exist, so you could add in the Zookeeper, the Fusa King, and
That was a kiss.
him from the first one, and maybe the extra hippos from the second game as a little nod to those that played those games. That just more than doubled the roster on its own. And just like the character roster, the track list is also really small. Again, 9 tracks, with 2 of them not being from Madagascar. Now with this, I can't be as harsh because you actually don't see that many locations in the movies, but some fun could have been had here. Maybe have the streets of New York with a little bit of Grand Central Station, the dam that was in the second movie, even a joke Antarctica level, or even a single night level. Both of these issues, on top of feeling that things were played far safer than they should have, lead to races getting repetitive with almost the same characters each time and not that many tracks to spice things up. Now, you more than likely don't know this about me, but when it comes to sports or racing games, the only ones I ever play have gimmicks to them and don't play too much like the normal activity. Usually that means it's a Mario or a Sonic one. The normal ones are too boring to me, but this game in its regular game mode is too chaotic. In other racing games with items, most items only stagger someone a little bit. At worst, they'll knock you into the air then back down, but that's only with a few items in the game. In this game, however, just about every item that isn't supportive sends you tumbling forward, jumping around in your cart, or has your cart weaving from side to side. It's fine for a few items that do this kind of effect, but when most items in the game do this, and you can be hit multiple times in succession due to the CPU AI, it can be outright uncontrollable. Not to mention that the CPUs will almost always take the fastest route in a track, and apparently CPUs immediately go back to their top speed once out of stun without using turbo. That is on top of rubber band AI already existing. It's also just as annoying using some items because there are so many times where I want to hit someone that is right in front of me. I will throw the item and it will avoid them entirely and hit someone else, if anyone at all. So most of the time I just throw my item into the wind and hope it hits something. If it does, cool, but again, they'll just get back up immediately anyways without having to expend anything. Using most items feels far too inconsistent and aggravating to use. Even without the help of items, bumping into carts and objects is incredibly wonky. Sometimes it's just a slight tap. Other times you get stuck next to each other, other times it sends you careening into a wall. This is even more relevant in races on higher speeds, as it's even easier to crash. Thank goodness there's a reset button to put you back on the right track, but it almost feels like it exists because this issue exists. But even then, it'll occasionally put you in a bad or awkward place. All of this makes me wish that only 4 racers was the default for normal races like in the move it mode, because there it's not as chaotic and could lead to a little bit less repetition with the cast. Characters do feel fairly different enough for the stats to matter, and sometimes their character star power as well, but honestly it only matters in the time trials and move it modes, as the default mode is too chaotic to properly notice them unless their stats lean heavily in a certain direction. And also, since CPUs have rubber band AI, it almost doesn't matter for them either. Mango collection for points in the championships doesn't really matter. It's supposed to offer a little bit more of a side objective to stay in the race, but I've never had a time where the difference between me succeeding or not was based on collecting the mangoes along the track. In fact, most of the time it wasn't even close. Then again, maybe it's for the best that it's that way. I don't want to win 3 races and lose to someone who collected 50 mangoes or something. This game actually did 200cc 6 years before Mario Kart did, which I would congratulate, but why can it only be done mirrored? Also, why is it the only one that can be done mirrored? Feels like a very easily missed opportunity for something very easy to implement for all the other speeds. Checkpoint Race is pretty boring. It was the only game mode that I did twice and then immediately moved on to the other 2 game modes that are way better. There is a multiplayer version, but I couldn't even do that, so moving on. There are leaderboards, but no online play. I don't even know what the leaderboards look like because I don't have an Xbox Live account, but I think it would be funny seeing what times people got. Okay, so this is definitely the most filler cash cow the series has had so far. It played things way too safe in terms of the character and track roster and pretty much no story, while the gameplay in the default modes feels like it's in the exact opposite direction, being too wild to properly enjoy, which is crazy because this game is actually pretty simplistic outside of Turbo. The modes that I had the most fun with had to alter the game from the default by a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the main appeal in racing games typically aren't the side modes. If some of the best moments in a racing game are when you can't get interfered with by anyone, or the default mode has changed so much to the point where it's not the normal game mode, there's a little bit of a problem there. You want a better racing game with Shrek in it? Just play Shrek Smash and Crash Racing instead. That game's not the best, but it's better than this. You want a racing game for DreamWorks characters? There's one for that too. Not sure if that's better actually, but it exists. Want to play a racing game in general? There are a lot of other options out there. This one should not be one of them. What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and thank you guys for making it to the end of this video. Honestly, don't really know what else to say about this game other than I played it in my childhood and enjoyed it then, and then I don't enjoy it as much now. Also, there was a wheel accessory thing for the Wii version, which was basically the Mario Kart one, but it's green. I don't own it, and I don't know whether to be thankful for that or not, considering what this series is. But that's definitely a defining characteristic of how much of a cash cow this game is. But anyways, after this Madagascar game, it's going to be Madagascar 3, which is cool. That's the only mainline Madagascar game that I have not played before, so it's going to be very interesting going into that game after playing the first and second one. And then after that, it's pretty much just the penguins from then on out, which on one hand is pretty cool because I like the penguins, but then on another hand is like, I don't really get to see the rest of the cast that often, if ever anymore. So in that aspect, it's going to be a little bit sad, but we have to move on with the series. A lot of the series that I am reviewing is going to end at some point. It's going to take a while for a good amount of them, but at some point it will still end, and Madagascar is not going to be any different. But anyways, if you guys have not already, make sure you guys go down to the description below because that's where all of my social medias are located. My Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, and Patreon are all in the description, and they are all ways for you guys to be notified of whenever I upload another video or have an update for the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more, as well as share this video out with your friends and family. But until the next video, take care.